All right, buckling up for another deep dive today. And let me tell you, this one's got my spider sense tingling in a big way. We're talking about Trinidad, TDA for short. And this isn't just another street gang we're talking about. Oh, no.
No, not at all. These guys are the real deal, operating on a level that, frankly, rivals some international cartels.
Right. From what I'm seeing, they basically cut their teeth running a whole prison system down in Venezuela.
That's right, the Venezuelan prison system,
Yeah.
about as rough as it gets. And they didn't just survive in there, they basically ran the place. Which should give you a clue about the kind of ruthlessness we're talking about here.
Yeah, and now they've kind of set up shop in San Antonio, Texas, and it's not like they're keeping a low profile either. These guys are taking over apartment complexes, whole buildings, turning them into their own personal, I don't know, fortresses of crime. It's a whole new level of brazen.
It's a strategy we've seen before, actually, but they're taking it to a whole new level. Remember what happened in Aurora, Colorado a few years back?
Oh, yeah, that was a mess.
TDA moved in, took over apartment buildings, turned the whole place into basically an open-air drug market. Residents were terrified, and the authorities, well, let's just say they were caught flat-footed.
Okay, so this is way more organized than your average gang activity. But let's back up a sec for folks who might not have heard of TDA before. Give us the origin story, the Spark Notes version. Who are these guys and how did they get so big?
So TDA starts, like you said, in the Venezuelan prison system, one of the most brutal in the world. It's like a pressure cooker for creating hardened criminals.
Yeah, not exactly known for its rehab programs.
Not quite. Anyway, TDA, they rise to power inside, establish this, I guess you'd call it a code of conduct. Super strict, super brutal, and efficient. They were organized, disciplined, and they knew how to use violence to get what they wanted. And what they wanted was power, plain and simple.
And it wasn't long before that power extended beyond the prison walls, right? I mean, they're involved in everything. Drugs, human trafficking, extortion, you name it.
Right? They saw an opportunity, a vacuum to fill with Venezuela's economy in free fall. People desperate, fleeing the country. And TDA was there to, well, to exploit that desperation.
It's predatory, isn't it? Taking advantage of people at their most vulnerable. And it sounds like they're using the same playbook in San Antonio, targeting migrant communities, offering a sense of security, and then basically trapping them in this web of exploitation.
Exactly. And that's what makes this situation so complex, so difficult to unpack. We're talking about crime, yes, but we're also talking about immigration, about poverty, about the failure of systems to protect the most vulnerable among us. It's a humanitarian crisis, playing right into TDA's hands.
It's heartbreaking and scary because if they've already got a foothold in 4 apartment complexes in San Antonio, who knows how much further their reach goes, right? I mean, what's to stop them from expanding into other cities, other states?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to be honest, there's no easy answer.
And that's what's got me so worried. I mean, 4 apartment complexes, that's not just a coincidence, that's a strategy, right?
Absolutely. They're picking their targets very carefully. And it's not just about the real estate either. They're creating a climate of fear, basically making themselves invisible by making sure nobody wants to talk to the cops.
Yeah, I was reading about that. Witnesses too scared to testify, victims afraid to even report the crimes. It's like they've got the whole community hostage.
That's the idea. It's straight out of the dictator's playbook. Rule by fear. And it works, sadly. Look, when you've got families, kids caught in the crosshairs, the instinct to protect your own, it trumps almost everything else, even if it means staying silent about horrific crimes.
It's a nightmare scenario. You escape one bad situation and you walk right into another. And we're not talking about petty crime here either. I mean, we've got reports of everything from, like you said, drug dealing, but also prostitution, even forced labor.
Oh, it's all part of the business model. They're diversifying, branching out into anything that turns a profit. And the more desperate people are, the easier they are to exploit.
And it sounds like they're using that desperation to their advantage, especially when it comes to immigration. I mean, we've heard reports about TDA basically setting up shop along the migrant routes, preying on people who are literally just trying to find a better life.
It's the oldest story in the book, unfortunately. Vulnerability attracts predators, whether it's on the Serengeti or the streets of San Antonio. And the really insidious thing is, they often try to present themselves as, I don't know, as saviors, offering protection, a helping hand. And then once they've got their hooks in, that's when the real exploitation begins.
So it's like a bait and switch. They lure people in with promises of a better life, and then they trap them in this horrible situation. And the authorities, they're playing catch up, right?
Well, to be fair, it's a complex problem. You can't just go in guns blazing, not when you're talking about communities that are already so traumatized. You need a nuanced approach, one that combines law enforcement with social services, with community outreach.
So it's not just about arresting the bad guys, it's about addressing the root causes, the things that make people vulnerable to this kind of exploitation in the first place.
Exactly. It's about breaking the cycle of poverty, of violence, of desperation that feeds into this whole system. Because if we don't, well, we're just going to be stuck in this endless game of whack-a-mole.
So where do we even start with something like this? It feels like we're talking about, I don't know, a whole societal shift, not just a police raid.
And you're not wrong. This isn't just about rounding up a few bad apples. We're talking about a fundamental shift in how we address organized crime, how we deal with immigration, how we support vulnerable communities. It's a big ask, no doubt.
Well, yeah, it's a lot more complicated than just lock them up and throw away the key.
Right. Right. And honestly, that approach rarely works, even when it's tempting, especially with an organization like TDA, which thrives on chaos and exploitation.
Hmm.
You cut off one head, another one pops up.
So we need to cut off the, I guess, the blood supply, make it
Yeah.
harder for them to operate, to recruit, to, I don't know, to exist in the first place.
Exactly. We hit them where it hurts, which is their wallets, go after their finances, disrupt their networks, make it harder for them to move money to launder their profits.
And I'm guessing that's not easy, right? I mean, these
Yeah.
guys are practically a ghost organization.
No, it's not easy, but it's possible. It takes intelligence sharing, international cooperation, and a whole lot of old-fashioned detective work.
But it also sounds like we need to be doing more on the ground level,
Right.
giving people alternatives to gang life, to exploitation.
100%. Because right now, for a lot of people, TDA is the only game in town.
Yeah.
They're the ones offering jobs, offering protection, even if it's a twisted, violent kind of protection.
Mm.
We need to change that equation, show people that there's a better way.
And that's a tough sell, right? I mean, you're talking about communities that have been let down by institutions, by governments, by, well, by society as a whole.
It is a tough sell,
Yeah.
but it's not impossible. It takes time, it takes resources, it takes a genuine commitment to change. And honestly, it takes listening. We need to understand the needs of these communities, the challenges they're facing, the fears that are driving them into the arms of groups like TDA.
So it's a multi-pronged approach. We need to go after the criminals, yes. But we also need to address the underlying issues, the poverty, the lack of opportunity, the fear that make people vulnerable in the first place.
Exactly. It's not either, it's both hand.
Mhm.
And it's going to take a sustained effort from all levels of government, from law enforcement, from social services, from communities themselves.
And I'm guessing just from the conversations we've had today that there's no quick fix, right? This is a long game, a marathon, not a sprint.
Oh, absolutely. This is about changing hearts and minds as much as it's about changing laws and policies. It's about building trust, creating opportunity, and ultimately about restoring hope.
Well, that's a tall order. But on that note, I think we're going to have to leave it there for today. This deep dive into TDA's rise, well, it's been eye-opening, to say the least. And honestly, it's left me with more questions than answers.
And that's okay. Sometimes the first step to finding solutions is admitting that we don't have all the answers.
Well said. To everyone listening, thank you for joining us for another deep dive. We'll be back next time with another look behind the headlines. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.